Welcome back. This is chapter 4, The Enemy, written by Per S. Back. And now I'm going to explain page number 42 to you. So here we go. It won't bother me much, the young man said. His young face was gaunt under the stubbly blonde beard. Say, doctor, I've got something I want to say to you. If I hadn't met a Jap like you, well, I wouldn't be alive today, I know that. So here, these lines say that the young American was least worried about his stiff muscles to try massaging as prescribed by Dr. Sadao at that moment. But his sickly appearance was the result of rough blonde beard he had. Here, he wished to thank him for not being like other Japanese. He owed his life to him. Second para. Sadao bowed, but he could not speak. Sure, I know that, Tom went on. His big thin hands gripping a chair were white at the knuckles. I guess if all the Japs were like you, there wouldn't have been a war. So here these lines suggest that Sadao had no words to offer here. He only bowed for his nice words. He went on with his thoughts, gripping a chair now for support with his big thin hands. And then he relinquished all possibilities of war, provided all Japanese were like him. Next spot. Perhaps, Sadao said with difficulty. And now I think you had better go back to bed. He helped the boy back into bed and then bowed good night his head. So here these lines say that Sadao could only express his uncertainty over his remark, and then suggesting him to go back to bed, helped him into it and bowed, bidding him good night. Next part. Sadao slept badly that night. Time and time again he woke thinking he heard the rustling of footsteps, the sound of a twig broken or a stone displaced in the garden. A noise such as men might make who carried a burden. So here, these lines say that night Sadao could not get a sound sleep, as his mind went repeatedly to the thought of assassins entering the house and killing the American. So even a faint sound alerted him. Next para. The next morning, he made the excuse to go first into the guest room. If the American were gone, he then could simply tell Hana that so the general had directed. But when he opened the door, he saw at once that there on the pillow was the saggy blonde head. He could hear the peaceful breathing of sleep, and he closed the door again quietly. So here, this line say that next morning, the other morning, Sadao had to look for an excuse to be the first one to visit him, to find out if the plan could fully be executed or not. And if so, he would let Hana know of the orders from the general. But what he discovered was something he wasn't expecting. He lay sleeping there peacefully, and so the door was closed quietly back again. Okay, next para. He is asleep, he told Hannah. He's almost well to sleep like that. He is asleep, he told Hannah. He's almost well to sleep like that. What shall we do with him? Hannah whispered her old refrain. Sadao shook his head. I must decide in a day or two, he promised. So here, these lines say that while returning, he informed Hannah of his progress, pretending he went there being a doctor. Here Hannah repeated her old question, to which he promised to decide the matter in a day or two. The next para now. But certainly, he thought, the second night must be the night. There rose a wind that night, and he listened to the sounds of bending bows and whistling partitions. Hannah woke too. Ought we not go and close the sick man's partition? She asked. So here these lines say that on the second night would be the doomsday for the American, he thought. And at night there started a wind which created a lot of sounds, to which Sadao was listening keenly. It disturbed Hannah's sleep. She got up and suggested that they should go and close the partition of sick man's room. Now the next para. No, Sadao said, is able to do it for himself. But the next morning the American was still there. Then the third night, of course, must be the night. The wind changed to quiet rain, and the garden was full of the sound of dripping eaves and running springs. Sadao slept a little better, but he woke at the sound of a crash and leaped to his feet. So here these lines say that Sadao declined the suggestion, saying the American was capable of doing it. Next morning saw the same story getting repeated. Then he thought the third night would be the final one for the American. Though there was no wind, the rain this time caused some of those confusing sounds. So this is all for now. Thank you.